The wind whistled over the barren hills as Sister Maribel tightened her worn shawl and looked across the empty yard of St. Helena's orphanage, a heart heavy as stone. Thanksgiving was only 2 days away, and the pantry shelves were bare as the drought-stricken fields outside. 23 children, hungry and hopeful, slept inside the old wooden building, unaware that the holiday meant nothing this year but a reminder of their poverty. Sister Maribel had prayed all month, asked for help from the townsfolk, written letters to every church within 100 miles. But the year had been cruel to everyone. Drought had stripped crops, cattle sickness had taken herds, and the nearby mining company had shuttered without notice. Now, the orphanage stood quiet, lonely, forgotten by the world except for the children who depended on her. In the chilly dawn light, she whispered, "Lord, I don't need miracles, just enough so they don't go hungry." But the only answer was the wind. Inside, little Annie woke early and tiptoed to the kitchen, hoping for biscuits the way Sister Maribel sometimes made when flour was plenty. But the only thing on the table was yesterday's thin broth. Annie's soft breath wavered as she dipped a finger into the pot and tasted it, her blue eyes dimming a little as she realized this was all that was left. She had been at the orphanage for 2 years, ever since her parents disappeared during a winter storm. And though she had known hunger before, something about Thanksgiving made it feel sharper. She tiptoed away, wanting to help, but not knowing how. By mid-morning, the children gathered for lessons, but their stomachs growled louder than their voices. Sister Maribel tried to keep spirits lifted, telling old stories about pilgrims and gratitude, but even the littlest ones could sense her trembling worry. Outside, the sky was an unbroken gray, the kind that made the world feel empty. Far out on the dusty road, invisible to everyone at St. Helena's, a lone rider watched the orphanage from a ridge. His hat was pulled low, his coat battered, and his horse a thick-muscled buckskin, brushing dust with each slow step. His name was Eli Mercer, though nobody in town had heard it spoken in years. People said he used to own one of the largest ranches on the frontier before tragedy burned his world to ash. He never stayed in one place long, drifting through towns, helping where he could, but never letting anyone get close. Yet today, something tugged him toward the little orphanage in the Valia memory. A voice, perhaps a promise he once made to a woman, now long gone. As he surveyed the old building, he noticed the sagging fences, the cracked water barrels, swayed the smoke from the chimney thinned before reaching the sky. He saw a group of children huddled near the porch, their faces pale with hunger. Eli clicked his tongue softly, his jaw tightening. "Ain't right," he muttered. "Ain't no child supposed to starve on Thanksgiving." He turned his horse toward town. That afternoon, Sister Maribel made the hardest decision of her life. She gathered the children in the dining room and explained as gently as she could that there would be no Thanksgiving feast this year. "But we will still give thanks," she said, her voice cracking despite her effort to keep it steady. "We will be grateful for each other, for this roof, for the love we share." The room fell still. A few children cried quietly. Annie held the hand of her friend Samuel, the smallest boy, Kay, and whispered to him that everything would be all right, even though she didn't believe it. As darkness fell, Eli walked through the general store in town, scanning the shelves as if measuring the weight of every can, every sack of flour, every crate of apples. The storekeeper raised an eyebrow as Eli hauled bag after bag to the counter: potatoes, beans, dried corn, sugar, coffee, smoked ham, a plump turkey, spices, blankets, fresh boots in children's sizes, lantern oil, candy sticks, warm coats, jars of honey, and 2 wheels of cheese, planning to feed an army. The shopkeeper asked, half amused. Eli simply muttered, something like that. He paid without haggling, then made another stop at the bakery, purchasing 5 fresh pies and a stack of bread larger than a saddlebag. When he finally reached the livery stable, he borrowed a wagon, promising the stable master he'd return it by sunrise. The stable master didn't argue. The look in Eli's eyes was enough. For the next hour, Eli loaded the wagon in the cold dark, his breath forming clouds as he worked. He tied down the supplies, covered them with a heavy canvas, and harnessed the sturdy draft horse the stable master had lent him before climbing onto the driver's seat. He reached into the wagon and pulled out a small wooden carving of a woman's face, worn smooth from years of being held. "Rebecca," he murmured, voice low and tender. "You always wanted to help them kids. Looks like we're finally doing it." Back at the orphanage, sleep came slowly. The children curled under thin quilts, whispering about the old Thanksgivings they remembered before life had scattered them like dust. Sister Maribel walked from room to room, tucking each child in, praying softly that somehow morning would bring hope. Then she returned to the chapel and sank to her knees, whispering, "Please, please let me give them one good day. They deserve one good day." Miles away, the wagon wheels turned across the moonlit road. Just before dawn, a soft crunching sound drifted through the orphanage yard. Samuel, always the lightest sleeper, sat up in bed and crept to the window. Through the frosted glass, he saw the silhouette of a large wagon pulling up to the gates. A man in a long coat climbed down and began quietly unloading sacks onto the porch. Samuel rubbed his eyes. He didn't know if he should wake anyone, but something inside him whispered that this wasn't a dream. He hurried to Sister Maribel's room and tugged on her sleeve. "Sister, someone's outside." Maribel nearly jumped from bed, fear prickling her spine. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped carefully to the front door. She opened it slowly, half expecting trouble or, worse, strangers seeking something she didn't have. Instead, she froze, her breath catching. On the porch lay enough food to feed the orphanage for weeks. Boxes of vegetables, sacks of flour and cornmeal, fresh bread, a whole turkey, pies, blankets, clothes. More than she could have imagined in her boldest prayers. A tall man stood by the wagon, tightening the last of the ropes as if preparing to leave without so much as a word. The wind carried his hat's brim low over his eyes, and he made no move to introduce himself. "Sir," she called, voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you." Eli shook his head. "Ain't no need." He turned away, as if he hoped she wouldn't recognize him, though they had never met. But she stepped closer, studying him with the gentle intuition of someone who had spent her life caring for the lost. "You've done something extraordinary," she said. "No one else knew how badly we needed help. World's got enough sorrow. Don't need young'uns adding to it," he said softly. "Let Em have a real Thanksgiving. Let Em feel loved, even if just for a day." Before she could say another word, little Annie rushed onto the porch, her bare feet freezing on the wood planks. She stared at the mountain of food and supplies, then at the quiet man standing by the wagon. "Are you an angel?" she asked, her voice small but full of wonder. Eli froze. He had been called many things in his lifetime: rancher, drifter, troublemaker, widower, but never that. Slowly he knelt, so he was eye level with her. "No, sweetheart," he said, voice breaking with an emotion he hadn't let himself feel in years. "I'm just someone who knows how hard the world can be." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his rough hand gentle. "You make sure everyone shares here, and tell your friends they matter. Every single one of them." Annie nodded eagerly, then wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. Eli stiffened, startled, then carefully returned the hug, closing his eyes as memories of his own lost daughter warmed and ached inside him. When Annie stepped back, she looked at him the way only a child could, with trust so pure it could thaw the coldest heart. Sister Maribel saw something flicker in the mysterious rancher's sorrow, longing, and a kindness too deep to measure. "Stay for the meal," she said gently. "The children would love to thank you properly." Eli shook his head, already climbing onto the wagon seat. "Can't. Roads are long, and I ain't much for celebrations." He took the reins, paused, then added quietly, "You take care of him, sister. Kids like that, They're the future of this whole land. As the wagon began to roll away, Annie ran after it. Wait, mister, what's your name? She called. But he only tipped his hat without turning back. Happy Thanksgiving, he said, voice carried away on the wind. He disappeared down the road before the sun could rise. That morning, the orphanage erupted with joy. The children danced around the supplies, marveling at the feast laid before them. Sister Maribel cooked all day, humming with renewed hope. The turkey roasted golden, the pies warmed in the oven. And for the first time in months, the aroma of abundance filled the building. When they gathered around the table, the children bowed their heads. And Annie whispered the blessing, her voice steady and bright. Thank you for the man who saved Thanksgiving, she said. Wherever he is, please keep him safe. Out on the ridge beyond town, Eli Mercer watched the smoke rise from the orphanage chimney. Carrying the sense of the feast he had delivered, he let out a long breath, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. His horse flicked its ears, and Eli patted its neck. Reckon we did good, girl, he murmured.